Do you think you know the story of Carrie White? What if I told you that the infamous tale of a teenage girl with telekinetic powers was not simply the product of Stephen King's imagination, but rather his attempt to process something much darker, something he stumbled upon while researching unexplained phenomena in rural Maine during the early 1970s? The truth has remained hidden for decades, until now. In 1966, 7 years before King would publish his groundbreaking novel, The Small Town of Chamberlain, Maine experienced a series of inexplicable events that local officials worked diligently to suppress. What began as isolated incidents eventually culminated in what official records simply call the incident at Ewan High School, a night when 24 people lost their lives under circumstances that defy rational explanation. The details were systematically erased from public record, witnesses were silenced, and eventually the town itself seemed to collectively forget. Or perhaps they chose to forget. The real Carrie White was born Caroline Margaret White on September 21, 1949, to Margaret and Ralph White in Chamberlain, a logging town with a population of just under 3,000. The birth records at Westover County Hospital contain an unusual notation in the margin, anomalous delivery, though the attending physician's supplemental notes were removed from the file sometime in 1967. The only remaining document is a hastily scribbled note from Nurse Shirley Ames stating that the infant demonstrated unusual muscle control and focus uncommon in newborns. This note was officially dismissed as the observation of an overworked nurse on a double shift. Ralph White died in February 1963 when a construction accident at the Chamberlain Mills claimed the lives of 4 workers. The official investigation cited structural failure, but 3 separate witnesses reported seeing support beams move on their own moments before the collapse. These testimonies were stricken from the record after all 3 witnesses recanted within 24 hours. One of them, Thomas Murrells, disappeared entirely 1 week later. The case was closed. No bodies were ever recovered from beneath the twisted metal and concrete. Nothing remained to bury. Margaret White underwent a profound psychological transformation following her husband's death. Already a devout member of the Fundamentalist Church of the Divine Light, she withdrew entirely from community life, taking young Carrie with her. The church itself maintained few records, but former members describe Margaret's increasing obsession with sin, punishment, and what she called the devil's hand, working through her daughter. A child welfare check was conducted in August 1964, after a neighbor reported hearing screaming and praying from the White home for 3 consecutive nights. Officer Randall Brock found nothing officially concerning during his visit, though his personal journal, discovered in 2003 during the renovation of his former home, tells a different story. "The white girl stared at me without blinking for the entire interview," he wrote. "When I set my coffee cup on their table, it slid 3 inches toward her without her touching it. The mother saw my expression and whispered, 'She does that. The devil does that through her.' I left as quickly as protocol allowed. Some things are better left alone." The first documented incident involving Carrie occurred in 1965 when she was 16 years old. During a mandatory physical education class, Carrie was being taunted by classmates when the water sprinklers in the gymnasium activated without warning. The school's maintenance records show no malfunction in the system, yet every sprinkler head simultaneously discharged, soaking the gym and causing minor injuries as students rushed to exit. The incident report filed by Principal Henry Morton noted that the white girl remained perfectly still in the center of the gym, completely dry, despite standing directly beneath an active sprinkler. This report was later amended to remove this observation. Former classmate Susan Snell, in a 1981 interview for a local historical society project that was subsequently shelved, recalled, "Everyone knew something was wrong with Carrie, not just that she was quiet or that her mother was strange. There was something else. Things would move when she got upset, little things at first, pencils rolling off desks, locker doors swinging open. We all pretended not to notice because acknowledging it made it real." 3 separate teachers at Ewan High School requested Carrie's transfer from their classrooms between 1965 and 1966. None provided specific reasons in their formal requests, but English teacher Rhonda Seymour's private correspondence to the principal, found in the school's archived records, mentioned disturbing incidents, including papers flying off my desk when no windows were open, and the chalkboard eraser moving on its own when Carrie was being disciplined. The most telling document comes from school counselor Geraldine Dressler, who met with Carrie 4 times in early 1966. Her notes describe a profoundly isolated child with potential psychological issues stemming from religious trauma and social ostracization. More significantly, Dressler observed that during moments of emotional distress, small objects in my office appear to vibrate or shift position. I cannot explain this phenomenon, but it occurs only in Carrie's presence. Dressler requested a psychological evaluation, which Margaret White refused to authorize. 1 week later, Dressler took an unexpected medical leave and never returned to Ewan High School. Her current whereabouts remain unknown. Local physician Dr. James McIvers examined Carrie in April 1966 after she collapsed during a religious service. His medical notes indicate abnormal brainwave activity during moments of stress, though he attributed this to possible petit mal seizures. More disturbing was his observation that the examination room temperature dropped approximately 15 degrees during periods when the patient appeared distressed. McIvers recommended further testing at Central Maine Medical Center, but these tests never took place. The doctor's practice closed abruptly 3 months later, and he relocated to Arizona, refusing all further contact with former patients from Chamberlain. As spring turned to summer in 1966, the incidents surrounding Carrie White intensified. Police records show 7 separate emergency calls from the White residence between May and August. Each call was logged, dispatched, but ultimately filed with the same resolution: no action required. When pressed by local journalist Richard Digan, Sheriff Otis Doyle claimed the calls were the result of a disturbed woman's religious hysteria. Dagan's subsequent investigation ended when his research materials were destroyed in an unexplained office fire. The insurance report noted that the fire appeared to have started in several locations simultaneously, defying normal combustion patterns. Margaret White's personal journals, discovered during the demolition of their home in 1980, reveal her increasing terror of her own daughter. Entries from this period contain frantic prayers and references to the power growing inside her. One particularly disturbing passage reads, "She broke all the windows tonight without touching them. I prayed over her for 6 hours. The Lord tests me through her. The Lord sends this demon power as punishment for my sins. I must be stronger than her evil." The journals become increasingly incoherent, with the final entries consisting only of the repeated phrase, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." By early fall of 1966, tension was building toward an inevitable breaking point. Teacher Rita Desjardins noted in Carrie's file that the girl appeared increasingly withdrawn, yet somehow more present, as if occupying more space than her physical body. Desjardins recommended removing Carrie from physical education classes after an incident in which all the basketballs in the storage closet reportedly shot out onto the court simultaneously during a moment when Carrie was being taunted by classmates. The catalyst for what would follow occurred on May 27, 1966, during what should have been a routine shower after physical education class. What we know comes from fragmented accounts, sealed police reports partially declassified in 1997, and statements from survivors collected by independent researcher Thomas Quillen before his research was confiscated by federal authorities in 2001. While showering after class, Carrie White experienced her first menstrual period, something her religious mother had never prepared her for. Her panic and confusion triggered merciless taunting from classmates, led by Christine Hargensen and several other girls who pelted the hysterical Carrie with feminine hygiene products while chanting, "Plug it up." According to witnesses, the bathroom lights began to flicker violently and a crack formed in one of the mirrors. When teacher Rita Desjardins intervened, she reported feeling an electric current in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. Carrie was sent home, But what happened in the White household that evening has been pieced together only through forensic evidence and Margaret White's fragmented journal entries. It appears Margaret interpreted her daughter's menstruation as proof of sinfulness and attempted some form of religious cleansing ritual that escalated to physical abuse. Neighbors reported hearing inhuman screaming and seeing the house lights surge so intensely that several bulbs in nearby homes reportedly exploded simultaneously. What followed over the next 48 hours would change Chamberlain forever, though few records acknowledge what truly occurred. The senior prom at UN High School was scheduled for May 29, 1966, at the school gymnasium. In a move that puzzled many, popular student Tommy Ross invited Carrie White to attend as his date, allegedly at the suggestion of his girlfriend, Susan Snell. This unexpected social inclusion of the school's most ostracized student did not go unnoticed. The events of prom night exist in the official record as a tragic fire caused by faulty electrical wiring. The death certificates for 24 students and faculty all list smoke inhalation or burns as the cause of death. But sealed fire marshal reports tell a different story. There was indeed a fire, but it was secondary to something else, something the authorities could not or would not classify. Survivor Helen Shires, who managed to escape through a side exit, provided testimony that was quickly classified. The doors all slammed shut at once, not like someone pushed them, like they were pulled from the outside by something impossibly strong. Then the sprinkler system went on, but it wasn't water. It smelled like gasoline. Carrie was just standing there in the middle of everything, her dress covered in something red, and she was smiling. The most disturbing account comes from Vice Principal Henry Morton, who was outside the gymnasium when the incident began. His statement, buried in classified files until a Freedom of Information request partially revealed it in 2005, describes seeing objects, chairs, tables, decorations floating in the air inside the gymnasium through the windows. Students were being lifted off their feet. Some were pinned against the ceiling. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. Then, the white girl walked toward the doors. They opened without her touching them. Her dress was soaked in blood. She looked at me, and I felt something, pressure, in my mind, before being thrown backward approximately 20 feet into the parking lot. That's when the fire started. Fire department records indicate that the gymnasium was fully engulfed in flames. Within 90 seconds, a spread rate that fire experts later noted was virtually impossible without accelerants or explosive devices. More puzzling was that the fire appeared to have started from multiple points simultaneously, with witnesses describing it as running along the walls like it was alive. The aftermath was chaos. 24 dead, dozens injured, the gymnasium reduced to ash and twisted metal, and Carrie White. According to official records, she perished in the fire. Her remains were supposedly identified through dental records and buried in an unmarked grave at the request of town officials. But the death certificate, unlike the others, contains unusual discrepancies. The medical examiner's signature is illegible, not matching any known county official. The cause of death is listed simply as misadventure rather than fire-related injuries. And most tellingly, there's a stamped notation reading, "Case file, sealed by order of state authority," across the bottom. The town of Chamberlain never truly recovered. In the days following what locals only refer to as prom night, strange phenomena continued. Power outages affected specific houses, particularly those belonging to families of students who had tormented Carrie. Plumbing systems inexplicably failed. Most disturbing were reports of stones falling from the sky onto certain properties, a phenomenon meteorologists dismissed as localized hail despite clear weather. The White residence at 47 Carlin Street was destroyed that same night, not by fire, but by what official reports classify as structural collapse due to foundation issues. Photographs from the scene, now stored in sealed county archives, show a house that appears to have been torn apart from the inside, with walls bent outward as if from some tremendous force originating at the center of the structure. Among the rubble, search teams found Margaret White's body with multiple stab wounds from kitchen implements that appeared to have driven themselves into her body with significant force, according to the coroner's sealed report. Curiously, no blood evidence belonging to Carrie White was ever found in the ruins. No personal effects. Nothing to indicate she had returned home or perished there. Just a single handwritten note in what was confirmed to be Carrie's handwriting, reading, "They're all going to laugh at you." The note was collected as evidence and subsequently disappeared from the police evidence room 3 days later. The official investigation ended abruptly on June 15, 1966, when federal authorities arrived in Chamberlain and assumed jurisdiction over all aspects of the case. Local law enforcement officers were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. School records were confiscated. Hospital records regarding any injured students were sealed. Within 1 month, the incident had been officially classified as a tragic fire resulting from faulty wiring, and the town was encouraged to heal and move forward. But some continued searching for answers. Journalist John Feaster began investigating the events in 1970, interviewing survivors and family members who would still speak about that night. His notes describe a consistent pattern. Witnesses start willing to talk, provide initial details that contradict the official story, then suddenly refuse further contact. 3 months into his investigation, Feaster's home was broken into and all his research materials were stolen. No other items were taken. The police report describes it as a random burglary, despite the highly specific nature of what was taken. In 1972, a young writer named Stephen King arrived in the area, researching local legends and unexplained events for what he described to locals as a book of New England folklore. He stayed for just under 2 weeks, speaking with several residents about the Chamberlain incident. Shortly after his departure, King began writing a novel titled Carrie, which he would later claim was inspired by his observation of high school dynamics and 2 girls he had known in his youth. The novel was published in 1974, presenting a fictionalized version of events that preserved the core truth while wrapping it in enough invented details to be classified as fiction. When questioned directly about the Chamberlain connection in a 1981 interview, King became uncharacteristically reticent, stating only that some stories find you and some stories warn you to stay away from them. The interview was subsequently edited before publication, removing this exchange entirely. King has never again publicly addressed any connection between his novel and the events in Chamberlain. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports that emerged in the decades following the incident. Between 1967 and 1990, 17 former Ewan High School students who had been present that night died under unusual circumstances. 3 in car accidents where vehicles appeared to veer off the road with no explanation. 4 in household accidents involving electrical failures. 2 drowned despite being strong swimmers. 1 was crushed when shelving in his garage spontaneously collapsed. The statistical improbability of these deaths occurring naturally within this specific group led researcher Martin Caulfield to begin mapping connections, only to abandon his work after experiencing what he described as a home invasion by something that wasn't human. Caulfield checked himself into a psychiatric facility in 1991 and refused to discuss his research again. The most compelling evidence that Carrie White did not perish in 1966 comes from scattered sightings across New England over subsequent decades. A teacher in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, reported a young woman matching Carrie's description applying for a janitorial position at an elementary school in 1970, providing the name Carrie Brigham. When the principal requested references, the woman reportedly stared at him until the lights began, flickering, then turned and walked out. The school suffered an electrical fire that night. In 1982, a nurse at Boston Memorial Hospital filed an unusual incident report after treating a woman in her early 30s for minor injuries sustained in a bus accident. The patient, who gave no name, exhibited unusual brainwave patterns during a routine scan. More significantly, the nurse reported that medical instruments kept malfunctioning in her presence, and that, at one point, when startled by a loud noise, all the cabinet doors in the examination room opened simultaneously. When security was called to identify the patient, she had vanished, though the hospital's locked doors had not been opened. Most recently in 2018, a small fire at a senior living facility in northern Maine led to the discovery of journals belonging to resident Eleanor Brigham, who had lived there quietly for nearly a decade before passing away. The journals, currently held in a private collection after being sold at a state auction, contain entries describing the power that had followed me all my life and references to the night they all laughed for the last time. Facility staff described Eleanor as intensely private and noted that electronic devices often malfunctioned in her presence. Most telling was the final journal entry, dated the day before her death. I wonder if anyone ever knew the truth about Chamberlain. I wonder if they found Margaret. I wonder if they're still looking for Carrie White. The White case remains officially closed, yet questions persist. Why were federal agencies so quick to assume control of what should have been a local tragedy? Why do records continue to disappear decades after the events? Why did Stephen King choose this particular story to fictionalize? And why has he remained silent about its origins? The truth about Carrie White exists in the spaces between official records, in the whispered stories of survivors, and in the statistical anomalies that surround the case. The power she possessed, telekinesis, psychokinetic energy, or something science has yet to classify, remains unexplained. Whether she was a unique mutation, the result of genetic experimentation, as some conspiracy theorists suggest, something else entirely, the facts remain disturbing in their implications. What if abilities like Carrie's aren't as rare as we believe? What if they simply remain dormant in most people, triggered only by extreme trauma or specific neurological conditions? Government records declassified in 2010 reveal that between 1965 and 1984, the Department of Defense maintained a classified program called Project Starling that investigated spontaneous psychokinetic events in adolescence. The project was officially disbanded with no published findings, though former researcher Dr. Elias Voorhees stated in an unauthorized interview that we found more subjects than anyone would be comfortable knowing about. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this story isn't what happened in Chamberlain in 1966. It's the possibility that Carrie White wasn't unique, that others like her exist, undetected or suppressed, that the power she manifested lies dormant in human potential, waiting for the right trigger, and that our understanding of reality, of the limits of human capability, may be dramatically incomplete. If you've watched until the end, you now share in this knowledge. Some would say that makes you part of the story too. Knowledge has consequences, awareness changes perception, and perception shapes reality. If you feel a sudden chill, if the lights in your room seem to flicker momentarily, if objects seem to shift slightly in your peripheral vision, well, that's probably just your imagination. Probably. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, to be known despite decades of suppression, leave a comment with the words, "They're all going to laugh." Those who know will understand. Those who don't will soon learn. The truth about Carrie White has waited long enough, and she's been watching all along, waiting.